The galaxy-spanning war, which had endured for nearly 2 decades, was now reaching its zenith. There was no place in the galaxy where the carnage could not be witnessed. The CIS had held the upper hand for most of the war, but now the industrial might of the core worlds began making itself known. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel. We're glad to have you with us on our next venture into the Star Wars universe. As is our custom, we invite you to get comfortable, grab a snack, a beverage, and your DC-15 blaster as we get into the front line of one of the most iconic reroll battles of the war, Umbara. And while we're at it, here's a tip to spice up your battles on the virtual tabletop from our sponsor Chepeku and their new token system. Chepeku creates beautiful maps for tabletop adventures, with just about every possibility covered by their ever-growing library of creations. They're especially good for virtual tabletops, thanks to their animations, sound effects, and easy integration, but now you can take things one step further with tokens. Chepeku tokens offer an easy way to add player characters, NPCs, and enemies to your world, especially if you want to do it quickly. Not only do they have a massive selection to choose from, but they're all customizable to make them your own. Or if you need something right away, you can randomly generate a variant on the current token instantly. To access their catalog, go to chepeku.com/tokens. Subscribe there to use everything already available, plus 20 new tokens added each month, plus customizations, and you can get useful resources like the files for VTT integration. With tokens and maps together, your tabletop will be looking better than ever, so check out Chepeku today. The unshakable confidence with which the CIS had entered into the war was beginning to wane, as the vast numbers of droids that made up their forces required equally large resources to maintain or replace, and by 20 BBY, these resources were in short supply. In the earlier part of the war, the CIS had made it a priority to target major hyperspace lanes to secure both them and the planetary resources along them. A combination of both luck and the unexpected professionalism of the clones stymied these attempts. This was done while the Grand Army of the Republic was barely over 300,000 troops. Now that the army was well in the millions, with many hardened veterans, they could not only defend their territory in its entirety, but could also commit fully to offensives. There was now a time limit for the CIS, as they could only hope to turn the tide by gathering more allies, as the stalemate was beginning to break in favor of their adversaries. But this we know only as retrospective viewers. The contemporary observer wouldn't have noticed the change. Indeed, many systems which had declared neutrality originally had begun to shift towards joining the CIS due to Dooku's persuasion skills and the increasing hostility and authoritarianism of the Republic. Dooku knew, however, that these smaller planets meant nothing in the grand scheme of things, as they provided little if any benefit to the wider conflict. With the Republic advancing on important planets like Felucia and gaining ground in the stalemate on Saleucami, with the former being close to the CIS capital on Raxus Secundus, Dooku needed planets that were either rich materially, with massive industrial capacity, or which were strategically well positioned. Dooku had, as we discussed previously, attempted to bring Mon Cala alongside their cores, which would grant them access to exquisite starships, but this failed. And with this attempt foiled, he decided to try and seize a target at the heart of the Republic, politically if not geographically, the paradise world of Naboo, home of the Republic's Chancellor and one of its star senators, Padme Amidala. Viewers of our series will know this planet well by now, as it has featured in many previous episodes, but for those unaware, Naboo is located within the Mid-Rim. It was an idyllic planet, originally of interest for its plasma, although this was not of particular interest to either belligerent. It did not sit upon any of the major hyper routes directly, but it was well positioned on a trade route directly between the major Hydian Way and the Corellian-run hyperlanes. It was also within a short distance of major worlds like Sullust, Eriadu, and Malastare along the Rimmer. These three mineral-rich, heavily industrialized planets, being within striking distance of Naboo, helped make it a desirable target for those who did not possess it. Dooku also had political reasons to take the planet, as the war found its roots here with the blockade by the Trade Federation a decade before, and as was mentioned, it was home to Senator Padme Amidala, who was also the leader of the peace faction within the Republic Senate. Luckily for Dooku, there was corruption throughout the galaxy. All he had to do was find those greedy enough to work with him. To this end, he solicited the aid of Rish Lu, a Gungan who sat upon the High Gungan Council as a minister. Lu was a Gungan mystic who used his abilities to benefit other Gungans, similar to the position a priest or other holy man may hold in other societies more familiar to us. Lu convinced the boss of Otto Gunga, Leonie, to wear a necklace that slowly hypnotized him over time until he was fully under Lu's control. With Lu pulling the strings, he started slowly having Leonie give speeches denouncing the Naboo, which is what they called the planet's human inhabitants, as foreign occupiers and oppressors who had dragged them into conflict after conflict that the Gungans had no reason to take part in. Though the Gungans held a favourable view towards the Naboo, as both had fostered a very healthy relationship after the Trade Federation's blockade, many still held fresh the events of the Mon Cala Civil War, where many of their comrades had been slain on a world very far from the waters of their homeworld, in a battle which had very nearly been a disaster. Utilising this brief rise of cynicism, Lu was able to successfully sour the relationship between the species and had Leonie make calls for war, beginning to assemble the Gungan Grand Army. Hearing rumours regarding these events, the Republic sent Senator Amidala and Jedi General Skywalker to court Leonie and discover the murky details behind these events. Not long after arriving, Skywalker sensed the source of Leonie's odd behaviour and freed him from Lu's control. However, when they went to confront him, a fight broke out between them and Lu's hidden droids, which resulted in the wounding of Leonie and the escape of Lu. Leonie fell into a coma because of these injuries. As a result, no one could call off the Gungan attack, but disaster was averted thanks to quick thinking on Skywalker's part, as he recognized the similar characteristics Senator Binks had with Leonie. Binks quickly donned Leonie's robes and was taken to the army's assembly area, where they found Lu demanding the commencement of the attack, using Leonie's supposed death as the provocation for it. This was thwarted by Binks acting as Leonie, calling for general demobilization and denouncing Lu as the source of the conflict, which caused Lu to flee with Skywalker in pursuit. This unfortunately did not put an end to events on the planet. Soon enough, both Dooku and Grievous arrived, with the former making headquarters in Lu's secret laboratory. Grievous meanwhile landed at the assembly point and learned that the Gungan army had cancelled their attack on Theed, the capital of Naboo. He demanded to see Boss Leonie to discover why. Binks was able to fool the general and delay him, while the Gungan general Ruth Tarpals secretly depowered his droids. By the time Grievous had discovered the deception, it was too late, and he was forced to take on the Gungan army by himself. He was subsequently captured, though at the cost of the life of General Tarpals, who engaged him in a duel, sacrificing himself to give Binks the opening shot to fully disarm the cyborg of his lightsabers. The capture of General Grievous should have been a major achievement, and would have deprived the CIS of its only successful commander in a time when it desperately needed them. Instead, the Sith played their shadowy hand yet again, as Dooku utilised Skywalker's pursuit of Lu to set a trap for him, in which he too was captured. With both sides now having a hostage, a prisoner exchange was agreed upon, and this unique opportunity was undone. The CIS was denied an important planet yet again, and the Republic lost a great opportunity in the release of Grievous, which no doubt was discussed at length in the time following. The CIS would be given another chance at an important world not long after, as intrigue within the Republic arose yet again, as it so often did. With the front becoming stabilized, the military faction of the Senate called for a troop increase bill. This ran contrary to another bill championed by the Peace faction, which wanted to reduce military spending, seeing the stabilization of the border as proof that enough had been spent. The champions of these bills were Senators Medici of Umbara and Padme Amidala of Naboo, respectively, both fighting on the floor and behind closed doors for their respective bills. This newest jostle between the factions would abruptly end, however, with the deaths of the Senator of Rhodia, Onaconda Farr, and Medici himself, both of which were soon linked to the Senator of Kamino, Halibut Tony. She was vindicated when it was discovered to be Farr's aide who had murdered both of them for political reasons. This worked in favour of the deceased Dici's bill, as the military faction often got its way in the wake of such brutal displays of the war's potential dangers. Dici's death also catalysed Umbara's secession from the Republic, and their joining the CIS. It is unclear how far apart these two events were. Records indicate Dici was assassinated in late 21 BBY, while military operations on the planet were well past mid-20 BBY. Whenever this secession happened, we can surmise the Republic didn't take long to respond, as Umbara was invaluable to the Republic war effort, being that it was rich in dunium, a resource important for constructing starships. More importantly, it shared a space lane with Kashyyyk, an invaluable planet for the Republic that was already threatened by the surrounding CIS-aligned planets, and Umbara's addition to Separatist territory nearly cut it off entirely from the Republic. All of these factors thrust reclaiming the planet to the top of the Republic's priority list. Put in command of retaking the planet were Generals Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Alongside them would be Jedi Masters Pong Krell and Saesee Tiin, both accomplished strategists serving as detachment commanders. The Republic would field Kenobi's 7th Sky Corps in force, as well as Skywalker's 501st Legion, which would be transported on 3 Acclamator-class assault ships and 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers. The CIS didn't field any ground forces of their own, probably because they couldn't spare them. The Umbarans' own highly advanced technology seemed to be sufficient to hold the planet, in the eyes of the CIS and Umbarans themselves. The Republic seemingly agreed, as they committed the full might of the 7th Sky Corps and the 501st to combat them. Whatever the reason for their lack of presence planetside, the CIS could not allow this vital planet to fall back into Republic control, so they sent a naval detachment which was made up of 4 Providence-class dreadnoughts, 16 Munificent-class frigates, and 3 Recusant-class light destroyers, a truly formidable force. To take the planet, the generals planned to attack the largest and most important city, which was also its capital. There is no record of its name, so we shall continue to call it the capital. This was of course easier said than done, as the planet of Umbara's natural environment would be a problem to tackle in itself. Nicknamed the Shadow World, light did not reach the surface, making it a dark place, only lit by the bioluminescent animals and flora which called it home, and which were also highly aggressive and predatory in their own right. The plan called for a multi-pronged assault, with landings conducted to the north, south and east of the capital. The city had an outlying defensive line that was connected by several positions. These were to be assaulted via the east by detachments of the 7th Sky Corps led by Krell and Tiin. The southern advance was to be the main thrust led by General Kenobi and the majority of the Corps. To throw off the Umbaran defenders and hopefully weaken the other fronts, Skywalker was to be deployed north of the city and advance on it. We have only sparse details of the southern advance and the eastern assault, as our primary accounts come from the northern assault. As such, we shall focus on that and fill in the others with what we know. Given the strength of the CIS naval force, there was never any intention on the Republic's part of contesting them in space, though this would change later, as naval reinforcements were promised. Instead, they had their Venators quickly breach the blockade and allowed their Acclamators to swiftly run through the gap to deploy to the surface, while covered by fighter wings led by Commanders Ahsoka Tano and Barriss Offee. All landing zones were heavily contested, with many of the Republic's LAAT gunships being knocked out of the sky by the many Umbaran hover tanks waiting below. This had been expected, and so Skywalker had his ATRTs deployed, which soon overwhelmed the Umbaran line thanks to the walkers' speed and the low rate of fire of the tanks. Then they began pushing toward the city, but they found their advance had been intentionally lightly contested. The Umbarans soon set upon them as they crossed the ridge, but were eventually driven back by a bomber run. The Umbaran defenders would soon return, however, and began to harass Skywalker's force so badly he didn't have time to set up camp. Instead, they just continued their push towards the city. At some point, Skywalker received a summons from Chancellor Palpatine to come to Coruscant. Skywalker was reluctant to do this, but left anyway, as the invasion was progressing well, and it seemed they could spare him. Both Tiin and Krell had taken on the eastern defensive line and united their forces. With this, Tiin was given command of both detachments, while Krell was reassigned to command the 501st in Skywalker's absence. Though Krell had a string of victories to his name, he was infamous amongst the clones as he held little regard for their lives and prioritized objectives above all else, making him a terrible fit for the independent-minded members of Skywalker's command, creating a hostile atmosphere he intentionally fostered. The clones' fears with their new commander were soon proven well-founded, as Krell ordered the 501st along the main road to the capital, which Captain Rex was opposed to as he knew it would be easily defensible to the Umbarans, and as such thought a side route would be safer. Krell scoffed at this. He said time was of the essence in war, and delaying the advance for safety was a cowardly choice. This angered the clones, and that anger was further reinforced when they were proven correct. Their vanguard was ambushed on the road, and was barely extracted by the rest of the Legion. Krell was furious that Rex had ordered a retreat in the face of the enemy, but before the two could butt heads, a message came in from Kenobi. His and Tien's assault had been stalled, as the capital, though nearly cut off from the outside, was being resupplied via a newly discovered airbase west of the city. Given its hidden location, the 501st was in a prime position to assault it, as the Umbarans facing them were positioned to defend the approaches to the city. With these new orders, Krell redirected the 501st to swiftly attack the airbase. As they advanced, they soon came upon a thin gorge that blocked their advance. Rex wanted to go around, as moving through the gorge would pull the clones too thin. But Krell ordered they advance via the gorge, regardless of the risks. By this point, the clones were on the verge of mutiny, and were only held together thanks to Rex's leadership. With them uniting behind their captain, they advanced through the gorge. Moving in 3 groups, they eventually came under assault by several Umbaran crawler tanks. These monstrous centipede-like machines nearly destroyed the advancing units, but quick thinking by the clones saved the day, and they destroyed their attackers. This would only be the start, as upon reaching the outskirts of the base, they were set upon by Umbaran mobile heavy cannons. These were far more formidable than the crawlers, and were impervious to the clones' weapons. Knowing they could not destroy the cannons, and that retreat through the narrow gorge they had been forced to advance through wasn't an option, Rex ordered 2 clones to infiltrate the airbase and commandeer some Umbaran fighters. This was a success, and not only saved the operation, but led to the capture of the airbase, and with the airbase in the Republic's hands, the capital was now completely cut off. The Umbarans were working on borrowed time. While they did have a CIS supply ship in orbit to resupply them, this was only a temporary solution, so retaking the airbase was crucial. The Umbarans repeatedly assaulted the airbase, but were repulsed every time. Long-range missiles supplied from the orbital supply ship were stalling the Republic's southern advance, which was being directed towards the airbase as well. Kenobi informed Krell of the situation, and Krell proposed to link up with Kenobi before transmissions were cut off. Krell ordered the 501st to be prepared to assault the city within 12 hours. The clones were strongly opposed to this, as it would put them in the firing range of the missiles and almost certainly get them all killed. As usual, Krell ignored these concerns, and he also denied a request from the clones to utilize the captured Umbaran starfighters to assault the supply ship. The clones at this point were fed up with Krell, deciding to go ahead with their own plan. They were able to successfully infiltrate the supply ship and destroy it, though this came at the cost of one of their lives. Krell was furious and ordered the survivors of the mission executed. The clones disobeyed yet again, but before anything could escalate further, they were informed that the Umbarans were attacking, and this time in captured clone armor. Putting aside their differences, the clones took positions to repel the assault, and met the Umbarans in the field, only to quickly discover these were not Umbarans, but were clones of the 212th Attack Battalion. The 212th reported they were reinforcing the airbase, and were told they would encounter Umbarans in captured armor. The one who reported this turned out to be Krell. All reservations were thrown aside, and members of the 212th and 501st confronted Krell, ordering him to surrender. He put up a fight, but was eventually captured and summarily executed by the enraged clones. Krell had become disillusioned by the war, and hoped that by intentionally sabotaging the Republic's plans, Count Dooku would take him on as his apprentice, though this is a laughable thought. Now fully cut off, and without hope of resupply, the capital quickly fell to the Republic forces, thanks to a spearhead assault led by General Kenobi. With the capital fallen, the CIS Navy soon withdrew, leaving the planet and the system in the Republic's hands once more. The brutality of the conflict left a deep scar on all involved, with Krell's betrayal deeply affecting both the clones and the Jedi Order, showing just how much the still escalating war was getting to all of them. In the next episode of this series, we will talk about the Battle of Umbara. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description, to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.